I am very excited to invite my guest for today into this chat in just a moment with an origin story that began waitressing at the R&R Cafe, serving locals, farmers, and truckers. Lisa even understands the value of connection and hard work. Her journey from these humble beginnings to leadership roles in corporate America, Lisa inspires individuals and teams to realize that they happen to the world, not the other way around. Welcome back to The Thermostat with Jason Barger. If you're currently on a commute, a walk, or just a micro break in your day, glad you're making time to step back, to think, and to reflect on the next steps on your journey. I've never been more convinced the best leaders and team cultures in the world are the ones that make time to step back, breathe in good oxygen, and calibrate their thermostat. I hope today's conversation leaves you feeling grounded and inspired. Now let's dive into today's topic to engage our minds and hearts in order to authentically lead and create compelling cultures wherever we are in the world. Hey everyone, it's Jason and welcome back to the Thermostat Podcast, wherever you are and however you're coming to the podcast today. Welcome in. So glad you are here. So glad you are making this a priority. We're in season 9, which means we've got 260 or some episodes, which is kind of amazing at this point. But anybody who's new to the podcast, welcome in. So glad you're here. Glad you found it, and it continues to grow and spread. So thanks for being here. Anybody who's been a part of this from the very beginning, so glad this continues to add value to your life and your work. My commitment to you is that I hope every time you listen to this, wherever you are, that this is a chance for you to step back, to have some good oxygen breathed into you as you think about the temperature that you're trying to set in your life and your work. And we'll continue to try to bring content to you that helps you do that so that you can think about whatever lies ahead of you on your path ahead. Before we get started, if you'll do all the things, of course, if you haven't subscribed, subscribe. If you, you got to rate it, the podcast 5 stars, of course, on whatever platform you're on. Leave an authentic review. I always think that one is interesting and helpful because we want people to just see your authentic words, what episodes resonate with you, what topics are helpful in a very noisy world. And that helps people find the podcast. And then obviously every time you share it, whether that's on social media or with your teams or colleagues, to say, hey, here's a topic we ought to listen to and then talk about together. All of those ways help amplify these messages and spread them further in the world. So thanks to everybody that does that. I am very excited to invite my guest for today into this chat in just a moment with an origin story that began waitressing at the R&R Cafe, serving locals, farmers, and truckers. Lisa even understands the value of connection and hard work. Her journey from these humble beginnings to leadership roles in corporate America, including leading teams with multi-million-dollar budgets, has shaped her deep understanding of the pressures leaders face in creating impactful, cohesive, and profitable teams. Lisa even is now an author, coach, and keynote speaker, known for her intentional yet energetic approach to life and leadership through her podcast, Have a Good Ripple Effect, which we'll talk about here in a second, and her book, Joy is My Job. Lisa inspires individuals and teams to realize that they happen to the world, not the other way around. Lisa and I met, shout out to the Impact 11 community, a community of speakers across the country. And I have appreciated from the moment I met her, her spirit and kind of synergy with some of my messages that listeners will be are aware of. So with all my messages, but especially thermostat cultures and my latest book, Breathing Oxygen, I think there's a lot of synergy. So with that, welcome to the podcast, Lisa.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I agree. We have a lot of synergy to cover today.
Awesome. I'm so glad you are here and taking time to chat. And it's always great to just have some fun other folks on the pod to chat with. So you and I are still, we've met, we've been around each other. We got to spend a couple of days sitting at the same table and talking, shop about all the weirdo stuff that we do in our line of work of supporting teams and organizations all over the place. And I've very much enjoyed that, but we're still getting to know each other. So if you would tell me something I don't know about you or my listeners might find interesting.
Yeah. Well, one of the things which you know about me, and then I'll add a tidbit that you don't, is that I wrote a book called Joy is My Job, and it started with my husband and I. We hung a whiteboard in our bedroom, and we basically sat on the couch one night and we're like, we're a little overscheduled, I think. And I said, what if we scheduled other things? Like, what if we chased joy like it's our job? So we hung a whiteboard in our bedroom and have been making a joy list of things that we could do, want to do, hope to do that bring us joy. And one of the things on that list is travel. And probably the most interesting countries that I've been to are Haiti and India. So those things you don't know about me, which if anyone out there loves travel, I always say, like, send your recommendations my way.
Yeah, no, you and I, we could do a whole podcast on that, and I look forward to following up on that conversation. I have been to Haiti. I have been through India, but really haven't spent much time there. And I love to travel. My wife and I, we have, in fact, coming up here just in a couple of days, we annually we do our own little visioning retreat where we go away for a day and a half, and we think about the year ahead and beyond, and do some of that. What would bring us joy, and what kind of, relationship do we hope to have? What kind of family? How does work fit into what we're trying to do, and all of that. So,
I love that.
Yeah, we can talk Haiti and all kinds of things coming up. That'll be fun.
Nice. Yeah, that is a really odd thing to be like, what are the probabilities that we've both been there?
Yeah, you don't meet a whole lot of folks that have. And so my cousin, Rob, who is a tremendous human, he spent more than 2 years. He spent 3 years living there in the Peace Corps out of college. And so I was lucky to go visit him and spend about 10 days kicking around and living in the villages and kind of hanging, which was a very profound trip.
100%. Yeah, we went there on a service trip, and we helped build some solar panels and do some things for a local high school. And with the goal of those students, you either in Haiti typically pay someone off to get into university, or you have to pass the test, which you don't have schooling, so therefore you don't pass. And so a high school down there is essentially like a boarding school for Haitian children, and they really give them all the skills necessary to pass the test to get into university. And so when I think about ripple effect, I'm like, gosh, you're creating future leaders of a country potentially. So
totally.
Yeah, we should totally do an episode on that.
Okay. Well, yeah, we've got more to discuss. Well, let's build off of that ripple effect, because I'm excited to kind of, obviously everybody understands, I think, what the ripple effect just means, which is part of that brilliance of bringing that forward. But I want to give you a chance to when you talk about have a good ripple effect, what does that mean? What is that? Tell us more about this kind of ripple effect idea.
Yeah, well, it started really more probably out of need than want. I was a brand new leader in healthcare, and if anybody's worked in healthcare, it's highly protocolized, very regulated, very customer service driven, and usually you're seeing people on the worst days of their lives. I often say, like, people will be like, oh, it wasn't brain surgery, and I'm like, actually it was. That was the area that I worked in was the neurosciences space, and you as a leader inherit your team often, and the team that I inherited, I had a pretty large crew in multiple locations, and a couple of those locations, we were what I liked to call too busy to be friendly, right? Like, we're saving lives, but not good to each other. And so when you're not good to each other, you can see the impact pretty clearly. And so I came up with the phrase, have good ripple effect, more to say, guys, it's our job to have good ripple effect. Like, we've got to take care of each other, because if we pollute our own waters, like, we know what happens. And that's really where my, I guess, angle of it came. And about 2 years in, I started to hear people in the hallway saying things like, okay, was that good ripple effect? And I literally did a high five to myself in the hallway of like, yes, because it's just a way to keep each other accountable, but also encouraging the thing that you want to see. And that's really where it started. I think that there are so many ways to say, I always say, like, the present is the present, right? Like, your presence here is the gift that you're giving, and people can feel it if it's not good. So that's my angle on it, and how it really kind of came to be more in a leadership capacity. It was a motto that turned into a way of functioning.
Yeah, no, I love it. And obviously, again, for that very effective way, people can quickly say, is this having a good ripple effect or not? And, it made me think about in my book, Thermostat Cultures, I talk about that wherever we go, we're creating vibrations.
Yeah.
And this, are my vibrations leading to what we want it to be? And so as, the hurried, executive that rushes down the hallway and blows past everybody along their path and, comes into the meeting all frantic and is it the vibration that we're wanting? And each of us share in the creation of that. And so obviously then we go into talking about kind of setting a temperature with the people around us. And so what is that? What is that you want? How marry the two ideas, the kind of having a good ripple effect and this idea of the book you wrote about joy is my job. How do you see the intersection? I mean, I very clearly see the intersection of those ideas, but in your own words, how do you see the intersection of these two ideas?
Yeah, I think that more on a personal level, I realized that, the values that I carry, right? Like things that are really important to me. My dad worked at a car dealership. My mom was a hotel housekeeper. And though we didn't have a lot of money, my dad, being kind of this quiet, stoic human, would often say things like, we might not have as much money as the next guy, but we work hard. And so I always carried a little bit of this, like, you work hard mentality. Yeah. And I think part of that is the impact that you create in the world. And so left to my own devices, I, hit a wall and realized, maybe I should have some joy too. Really, like I need joy and impact. And I think that the other coin that we realized was without a little joy, you can't make impact. And I think the same holds true with teams and engagement. I'm often thinking about, people's brains, we love pattern, right? Like we love a good, we know what's coming next. Yep. And that agenda is so organized, but we also love a little surprise. And when I think about how do you add in a little bit of surprise for your team, a little bit of joy, that becomes kind of a really neat engagement tool as well. So I think there are so many different ways to look at it, but I really do think you need both. And without the other one, you're probably going to feel a void.
Yeah, no doubt. So you just nailed two, by the way, words that are coming into this year, again, attached to this visioning thing that my wife and I do, but then my own personal stuff that I do, is that I always try to think about kind of what rises to the surface for me and what is it I'm, I talk a lot about, he or she who aims at nothing hits it every time. So where I look, my body will follow. So what is it I'm looking for? And anyway, not to go too far into the weirdo world of my brain, but So but where I've am hoping to emulate is each year I think about, well, what are those words, or what am I, what comes to the surface this year? And you nailed two of the three words, by the way. So I wrote just a couple of weeks ago up on my dry erase board in my playground in my office. I wrote joy plus connection plus impact. Yeah. And putting things through the filter of what does it bring me joy, or does it bring other people joy? Yeah. And is it creating connection and hopefully increasing and strengthening connection? And then is it having an impact? Is it, which, can be dramatic or could be not very dramatic, but is it progress? Is it moving the needle in some way? Yeah. And so I love that intentionality of, okay, well, how do I bring that to life? Does any of that make sense?
100%. Actually, I literally am sitting here thinking of a number of things. It's funny because when I think about joy and having it, right, and it's one of the things that my husband and I do is we are in each other's joy. So I often will say, if you want to get to know someone better, get into their joy. Like, what do they find to be joyful? So once a month, I sit down and I watch, the football game that he's really interested in, and he's telling me about the players and these rushing yards and these things that I do not understand nor care about. But really, my only goal in that moment is to be present for him, right? And so I'm nodding and smiling and asking questions of like, what does that mean? And it's really funny to watch him be more animated. And I think that also translates into the working world too. If you can start to follow people's, like, what they care about, what they're interested in, A, building connection, and B, figuring out what brings them a little joy. I always say, like, you've really unlocked kind of keys to the castle, because you get to really see a lot of how someone thinks and functions and shows up in the world. So I 100% agree with that, both personally and professionally.
No, I love that. And it makes me think about, in fact, I've done a whole podcast on this idea too, but John Acuff has some great language around this that talks about empathy being caring about what the people you care about care about.
Yeah.
And 100%. And then when you, which by the way is what you just described, is like, how do I get in the business of caring about what somebody I care about cares about? Yeah. And so if it's the football or if it's whatever it is, that if I can find joy in that, and that brings them joy, then we're radiating this same kind of joy. So that happens on a personal level. But where I think it also gets even more interesting is when we start talking about at the organizational level. Mm-hmm. And so how do we get in the business of caring about what the people we care about? Yeah. Our employees, our teams, throughout that. So connecting these ideas and back to the ripple effect and joy is my job, and that, what do you see in terms of engaging employees, intentional strategies around shaping that kind of culture? How do we help at an organizational level care about what the people we care about care about?
Yeah, if there were more cares to care. I think there's a couple of different things. The first thing that I often will say is, like, is your curiosity high? Because if your curiosity is not high, you're probably going to be slightly unaware of what's going on in the culture of the team that you're creating. Yeah. I remember I walked in on 3 team members in our break room. I was brand new. It was like the second week that I was leading this team. I walk into the break room and I overhear one of the employees that's been there 30 plus years giving a rousing speech to the other 2. Her back was to me, right? So she didn't know that I was listening, about how the ice machine in the break room had been taken away, and that this was symbolic for all of the things that leadership does around here. And she gave, it was one of the most rousing speeches. A little part of me was like, she's probably right. And then I was like, wait, no, I'm the leader. Like, I'm brand new. And she turns her back to me and I said, hi, I'm new here. And her face went red, right? I was like, I don't know why the ice machine went away, but can I report back? And instead of getting upset about, like, her reaction to it, I was just more curious of, like, A, where the heck is this ice machine? Because it had only been gone apparently 2 days. Yep. And then B, I'm thinking, what has happened over the course of your tenure here for that feeling to exist? And so I went on the hunt. Good news, the ice machine had been taken away to be cleaned. We hung a sign that said, don't worry, our beloved ice machine is coming back. And then it really allowed me to kind of get curious about what had occurred over time for her to feel that way. Yep. And I think that is a really interesting way to care, is through kind of curiosity and kind of separating your emotion from their emotion of, like, like, you feel like that. Why?
Yeah. And don't you think, I mean, that's the, what you're describing is the manifestation of that from a leadership perspective of saying, how do I seek to understand before I need to be understood? And so, like, hold on, help me get curious about and try to understand, well, what is that situation? What is that historical context that, again, cultures, as we know, are shaped over time. Yeah. And leaders have, create ripples through the habits that they have, and organizations create ripples through the habits that they have that begin to set a temperature. But let's take a break. Let's pause for a second, and we'll be right back. Many teams and organizations right now are realizing that they need to do both. They need to engage the minds and hearts of their people in person, where everyone in the room can experience the energy of congregating together and find clarity for the road ahead. And they also need to continue to find ways to engage the minds and hearts of their people virtually, with those who are working remotely or at a distance. So, if you are in the process of planning your next team meeting, company all-hands event, conference, or culture summit, and are looking for support with a powerful keynote speech, facilitated team conversations that are the currency for change, or deeper development on leadership mindset and an intentional strategy for the culture you're trying to create, I hope you'll contact us at jasonvbarger.com, jasonvbarger.com. It is my privilege and our honor to partner with great people to provide support in these areas. We want to breathe oxygen into your leaders and throughout your organization so you can set the temperature you want for your culture. We look forward to connecting with you soon. I hope you'll contact us at jasonvbarger.com, jasonvbarger.com. It is my privilege and our honor to partner with great people to provide support in these areas. We want to breathe oxygen into your leaders and throughout your organization so you can set the temperature you want for your culture. We look forward to connecting with you soon. Begin to set a temperature, and somewhere along the way, perhaps in that organization, language that I use is what we allow lingers and what we teach triggers. Yeah, and so 100%. Maybe in the past, there had been some kind of what I refer to as cultural dissonance, where our actions and our words were not in alignment. Yeah. And so maybe we allowed some behaviors to linger for a while. And so it creates this feeling when the ice machine goes out is, oh, here it goes again. Yeah, exactly. And so taking the posture of seeking to understand and then saying, well, hold on, let's teach a new habit, a new behavior. Is that's what I hear you describe.
Absolutely. A lot of the keynote speaking that I do really does tend to lean towards our attitudes, our behaviors, and our beliefs. So like, how are we showing up, right? We mentioned the presence. What are the behaviors that are occurring, some of which we don't even notice? Yep. And then what do we believe to be true? And it was interesting to see 2 out of 3 of her attitude was very much we must resist, and I was just like, huh. And then the belief here I'm gathering is that, it's always like this, or this is another way that, leadership's trying to, screw us over, really. Yep. And then in the sense of what are the behaviors, that have occurred, should occur, could occur. And I often do a fun exercise of having people actually evaluate their culture at the moment. So tell me, if I had everyone standing over here and I was going to take a picture of them on your team, what would I see in this picture? What's the attitude? And then we get to think about what are some of the things that it's normal to see. Do people walk in complaining? Do people, walk in distracted? And that I give some examples, which are really fun. And then what are the beliefs of the team? When I was noticing that we were too busy to be friendly, I actually took an informal poll in my one-on-ones, and I was like, hey, do you, if you had to answer this, and I kind of paused a little bit for effect. I'm like, do you think we're too busy to be friendly? I got 8 yeses out of 20.
Wow.
Yeah. And their belief was, we're saving lives. Yeah. You better damn well believe.
I'm not here to be friendly. Yeah.
Yes, I am too busy to be friendly. And so it was a really fascinating thing to watch. And then it was even more kind of maybe painful but fascinating undoing of that belief. But if we were to replace that belief with something else, and if we were to behave differently in it, what would that look like? And I think that's the trick to leadership, is being able to kind of zoom in and zoom out and then think about how do you influence, but not, tell people, well, maybe we don't have to be too busy to be friendly. Maybe we could be friendly and busy and make some joy and some impact along the way. It took a while, but we finally got there, and I could see people's minds being like, oh yeah, I should be nice, huh? I'm yeah,
totally. Well, what I find, and by the way, what I hear you saying is the part of that curiosity and part of that even informal kind of temp check, of hold on, I'm taking the temperature, which, with a lot of the teams and organizations I work with, we talk about the fact that, taking the temperature is an important piece of the process, to whether that's a quick pulse check, like the one-on-ones. Hey, how would you answer this? And to get curious, to listen to all of the things that you've described. And taking the temperature is an important piece of the process. But then even more important than that is then setting the temperature. So, okay, what are we going to do with that information? So the shifting of the mindset from and connecting the dots that, could, rather than these two ideas of I'm busy and that means I can't be friendly. Maybe we're challenging this notion that we can also have a lot going on, and still there can be a cultural component to how we show up.
Absolutely.
And what we want, and those kind of pulse checks, let's take the temperature, like let's step back for a second and say, wait, how are we showing up together? Helps us get there.
Yeah, and I love that temp check reference. And I think even to go one step further is, after taking the temperature, I always say, like, put it back in their hands. I remember I worked in a 900-bed hospital, which means there's about 6,000 people in a building at a time, which is crazy because that's my entire hometown, like, in a building. Yeah. And, like, Mom, you'll never believe it. But, we had a Starbucks in our building. And in healthcare, oftentimes you're doing a lot of hurrying and then you're doing a lot of waiting because it's like doctors with patient, staff's waiting for doctor to be done, that sort of thing. And so we had people going to Starbucks kind of willy-nilly. And it was so interesting because people would show up in my office thinking, like, solve this. Like, you solve this. Like, we should not let people go to Starbucks. Like, or like, I don't see why we can't go to Starbucks if we're in between patients. It was just a really interesting, I always think of it like a pile of opinions. Yep. And I went to Goodwill and I bought bow ties and long ties. And I did wash them. I brought them home, washed them. And in one of our staff meetings, I handed them out and I jokingly but seriously said, please put these on. About half the room did it, which I was a little like, are they going to do it? About half of the people put them on. And I said, welcome to leadership. And I broke them up into pods where they actually got to brainstorm on how we solve this problem. And I said, you can ask me questions. And they asked questions like, well, where's the policy? I'm like, there is no policy. This is house rules. Like, senior leadership doesn't tell us exactly how to function. Like, we get to decide down to this level what we do. And it was really fascinating. At the end of the day, there were like 2 pods that were like, we should not be able to go to Starbucks. And then there were 3 or 4 pods of people that thought, no, we just need a system or a process on how we handle it. And it was really fun to get them thinking about, okay, we took our temperature, but now where do we want to set that temperature? Totally. And then they got to help think about the solution. Now, I do put some parameters in place of like, hi, I'm not going to let you like go willy-nilly, but it was really fun to see their buy-in for it. And I even had one person say, this Starbucks is really delicious, Lisa, after they had solved it. And I was like, yes, because if you get to help create it, you like the end product better. So I think it hits on many things of what you just said.
Oh, no doubt. And again, without even knowing it, we stumbled into other references that I make, and that the synergy of these messages is Howard Behar, the former president of Starbucks, is a great friend and mentor, and like been on this podcast a number of times. He and I have talked about this very thing.
Oh, that is so funny.
But when they talk about at Starbucks, like literally at Starbucks, and when they were beginning, that they talked about that everybody shares in the creation of our cup of coffee.
Yeah.
And every single person that comes through the line and is ordering, and the barista says, what may I get started for you? That really what that experience is, that they are sharing in the creation of their own cup of coffee. They're participating in it. And so when I talk about culture shaping and what you just described is, there's the hold on, let's take the temperature and the process of that. And then there's the process, which is, you talk about participatory leadership, of being able to say, how do we create so that everybody shares in the creation of this cup of coffee? So that then we can say, well, what is that temperature that we want to set? And then what are we going to go do about it? And does that mean that everything gets, handled by vote and democracy? Like, no, but you create that greater buy-in that we all share in the creation of our cup of coffee.
Yeah, 100%.
And so we got to come up with that. Then there's a greater buy-in, and this is I'm now connected to this decision more than just Lisa said or somebody said.
It was done to me. Yeah.
That's right.
And that, I think that is a really like beautiful way to say that, of like, if you're a leader that does things to your team's going to do things to you.
For sure.
You know, and I feel like that was the key to really being like, at any given moment, anybody could call a quick timeout and be like, hey, appropriately, can I ask like why this is the way this is?
Yeah.
Right? Without having that leader jump back and say, well, you know, some things are like that, or I feel like there's
that's just the way it is.
Yes, I feel like there's often some subtext that as a leader you can add to help people along, but also give them some like insight into the decision. So anybody who came to our team later, they had context of why the Starbucks decision was made that way.
Yep.
And oftentimes people don't have that context to be like, I don't know, they just always do things. And I'm like, yeah, but not always.
That's right. And when people don't understand the why, or it hasn't been articulated to them well enough, or they haven't been brought into that, then what we as humans tend to do is we fill that void with negativity and make up our own stories and gossip. And then again, what we allow lingers, and so it can fester. Yeah. So that posture that you're describing of hold on, let me get curious, let me listen, let me take the temperature, and then bring people into participatory solution, based thinking, gets us to a place where now we're all setting a different temperature.
100%. Yep. I love that.
Do you have other, I'm wondering, I'm always curious of like, do you have examples of any other organizations or the ripple effect kind of idea, or like where you've seen like, oh, wow, that's a great example of the ripple effect kind of going throughout another team organization?
Yeah, we were brainstorming different questions, and I'm going to take it maybe in a slightly different way, because I think that every organization to a degree has both, right? Like good and the not so good. And it was just interesting. Last year I really worked on building the habit of going to workout, which for me, previous to that, I felt guilt. I felt a lot of guilt of like, I should be working, I should be taking care of my family, right? It was the thing that kind of fell to the bottom of the list. And so in 2024, I made that a priority of like, no, I'm going to go to workout. So yesterday I was at workout class, and it was really interesting because I tend to be at my workout class. My identity there is show up, work out, get out, right? Because I still probably carry a little bit of that guilt. And so I don't do a lot of like friend making, which isn't a bad thing, but it allows me just to kind of observe. And the two people next to me were talking about the ripple effect of their leader. And it was really interesting because one of them was describing a leader that I was like, I want to have that person as my leader. And the other person was describing kind of like almost the monster, right? The monster leader. And I just think about how the ripple effect of that went from work to now workout, like we're talking about it, to now the ripple of these two humans are now going to maybe go tell two other humans about, I was just talking to Sally so-and-so. And I thought that was a really interesting just moment to see the ripple effect in action. And I think like so often we don't even think about the after effects of like after work where this goes. I know that's not a direct answer to your question, but I just was like, man, it's everywhere.
No, that's a really practical answer to it, though. And what I would say is, that's the human communication side of anything, of what is it that we choose to share. And again, when I talk about where we look is where we go, where we look, our bodies will follow, is that if what I choose to look at is the negativity, the gossip, the blame, let me go find, in small group dynamics, the idea of triangulation where like, I'm going to go find then the person at the workout class, and I'm going to then vent to them, quote unquote, about this thing. And yet what I'm doing though is kind of sharing maybe not a positive ripple effect. Because now I'm sharing it with them and it spreads. The same thing spreads versus the person that walks into the coffee shop or the workout place or the, restaurant and chooses to say, let me catch all the good things that are happening around.
Yeah.
And what am I grateful for? And let me tell you about something that was awesome today. Yeah. That again, maybe wasn't perfect, because most things aren't, But let me tell you about something that was great. And then watching the way that changes the dynamic of everybody involved.
Oh, 100%.
Everywhere.
Yeah. It's funny. We went to a sporting event once, and our seats, it was in a really old arena. And so our seats were behind a pole.
Yeah.
And I remember
awesome seats.
Yeah. I'm like, these are terrible. And I remember thinking, I need a different seat. Like, next time I need a different seat. And I think that analogy, sometimes I'm like, I just need a different seat. I need to think about this or share this in a different way. And I liked the way that you were describing it, because in my mind, to that person at the workout, I'm like, either you need a completely different seat, like different leader, different job, or you need a different seat in the terms of perspective. Like you probably would have a better experience if you were looking at it a little differently. And maybe there's a little bit of both in there, right? You never quite know, but those couple of minutes they left a little imprint on my brain of like, oh yeah.
No, I love that. And picking another seat it means that it's a choice that you make. And am I going to sit in the same seat? And sometimes we have a seat that's sitting, and we're sitting in an imperfect seat where there is a bar in front of us, or however you describe that. And sometimes you got to just deal with it and make the most of it. And then other times though, there are other open seats.
There are.
And so don't stay there. Get up and actually move. And to say proactively, this is where I'm going to go be next.
Yeah. One of my favorite quotes is like you happen to the world, not the other way around.
Yep.
And it's the same when it comes to team. It's like you happen to your team. So what are the 2 or 3 things that you might do to be able to happen to them, right? Whether it's good ripple effect or joy or engagement, or even just like you said, gossip. There are so many different components of leadership that you could happen to that. Like you could affect the outcome, maybe not fully, but you could.
No, and we do. And that's the thing, like what I love about what you're talking about is we already do. We just aren't always aware of what that impact is. Yeah. And it's, it happens, again, I'm imperfect as much as anyone, but the ripple effect I have with my kids or with my wife or my friends or the stranger in the coffee shop, like we are already making a ripple effect. The question is it the one that we want? Yeah. And in my language, we're already setting a temperature. Is it the temperature I want? And when I come into a room, am I breathing good oxygen kind of into the room, or am I taking oxygen from the room? Yeah. And so those thoughtful, I think I once, the very first book I wrote was called Step Back from the Baggage Claim, which That's a great name, by the way. Thank you. When I first met you and the ripple effect idea we quickly shared, quickly shared about it, which I loved, immediately flashed to this because the book, I spent 7 days living in airports without leaving the airports the entire time. And sleeping there and watching people at airports across the country and watching the way that we move throughout the world. And so using air travel as a metaphor for how do we move throughout the world. And I remember watching this one woman going through the security lines in Boston where she was one of the few people that got pulled aside by TSA and, to check, like in this long line of people, everybody's going past and getting through. And then all of a sudden she gets pulled out of line and gets pulled over there and they throw her bag up on the thing. And immediately they're like going to do a search and they open her bag and her nice and neatly packed bag in a matter of seconds. These TSA agents are going through it and just rifling through her underwear's out in front of everybody. And things are everywhere. And yet the whole time this is happening as people are passing her, one person at a time, she's smiling, she's talking to the TSA agent, she's, it doesn't seem to be bothering her. And I just kept watching like, man, that's, every frustration point that most people feel in the airport, she's feeling, and she's not responding that way. Until finally the guy, when he's done with his check, he just looks at her and he's like, okay, you're good. And just leaves her whole pile of disheveled items like laying there on the desk. Yeah. And so she just calmly starts kind of just putting them, they're not folded now. So she's just kind of like putting them back in and she's zipping up her bag. And then all of a sudden she picks it up real quickly and she starts running with it in her arms in her high heels down towards her gate. And finally I clicked, I was like, oh, she's in a hurry. Never got that impression, but she's trying to make this flight. And the whole time she's running with these bags in her hands and running down the towards her gate, I swear it was like these, I write about it in Step Back from the Baggage Claim. It was like these ripples that were coming off from a passing boat, and everyone was watching her run, got this big smile on their face as she was like laughing and running. and I yelled out to her, like, I was like, or she looked at me first and she said, this isn't the easiest thing to do in heels. And I yelled out to her. For some reason, she locked eyes with me, and I said, yeah, but you're doing it well. And she just, with this giant smile. But it was a manifestation in a really small moment of what you talk about around the ripple effect, that everyone felt it along their path.
Yeah. And I think that there's something to be said of not only like how you think about the world, but also how you react to it. And I love that, her reaction to it, because I feel like so many people focus on what they can control. And sometimes it's like, yeah, but there's a lot of things you can't control. And, for her, like, she couldn't control that maybe she was going to miss her flight. And she was taking ownership of the only thing that she could control, which was her attitude.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And so when I think about your work and I see, again, the ripple effects that are happening, whether we know it or not, and within teams and organizations, that I do believe that is helping make our world better, whether it's in the coffee shops, the airport, the whatever, but also in teams and organizations, the best in the world. That's the way they're approaching it. It doesn't mean we're perfect, but are saying, how do we do what we do with greater intention and joy and mission?
I think too, like, what you put out comes back 100%. Like, I always joke, I've never flown first class except for one time, and we were flying back from Florida to Iowa. I live in Des Moines, Iowa, and there was a snowstorm, and so they rerouted us to Minneapolis, but of course snowstorm, because it's only a couple hours north of here. And so we ended up in Fargo, North Dakota. I was traveling with one other person, and we were stuck at this airport overnight. And Fargo, North Dakota has, 2 gates, I would guess. Like, there were not very many gates. Right. This entire facility was full of 6 or 7 flights that had been diverted there. And I laid on the floor and watched this woman basically tell person A through person 675, like, I'm so sorry, blah, blah, blah. And the next morning, she was still there. And I needed a new boarding pass, so I went over, and before I asked for my boarding pass, I said, hey, I'm getting a cup of coffee. Can I get you one too? I was like, what do you take in your coffee? And she goes, oh, just black. And I was like, okay, great. And then she goes, do you want your boarding pass? And I said, yeah. She goes, okay, I'll print it. Thank you. I ran and grabbed her a cup of coffee, thinking nothing of it other than this human has had one hell of a night. I ran her cup of coffee. She hands me my boarding pass. I literally scan the thing, get on the plane, and she put me in first class. And I was like, So sometimes you don't know what putting out good in the world is going to get you, but I often say, it will come back to you like a wave, right? It goes out, maybe it takes a little while, but it will come back. And I often think about her of just look at the power that she had that I didn't even consider. Like, there are so many people that have power to do good, and they just don't use it.
Yeah. And what I love about that, I mean, many elements of that story that I love, but is that the pursuit of going to get her the cup of coffee is not because you're trying to get first class.
No.
That becomes an outcome of just hey, I recognize and see and appreciate what you're doing. So I have a chance to create a ripple effect. And oh, by the way, the ripple effect comes back I'm not doing it for the ripple effect. No. I'm doing it, and yet the ripple effect creates this amazing thing. So
it does.
That's pretty cool. Well, Lisa, we could do this all day long, and I appreciate and look forward to our next conversation. But we're at our time, and I appreciate you jumping on and even just sharing a little bit. It's been exciting. I'm excited to share the ripple effect, and joy is my job with everybody. I will put more information about you in the show notes, but if you want to find more about Lisa or have a good ripple effect, lisaeven.com. But there'll be more stuff in the show notes. And I'll just say, I look forward to our next chat. I really appreciate you bringing your spirit to the pod today. It's good to have you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, thanks to everybody out there for listening. Hope this has been a moment for you to step back and to have a little bit of oxygen breathed into you, to think about the ripple effect that we all have and that we all are already making, and to seek out and say, what would bring me joy? What would bring joy to others? How do I care about what the people I care about care about? Mm-hmm. And to know that even in the little ways, but certainly the big ways, we can bring people into participation, the creation of our own cup of coffee, to help them create stronger teams, stronger cultures, and ultimately a stronger world. So appreciate everybody out there listening. Cheers to you in the path ahead. And if any of this is helpful to you even more, if you have any feedback, you can track us down, info@jasonvbarger.com, or just go to the jasonvbarger.com website and share any thoughts that you have with us, and we'll continue to try to help and support you wherever that may be. But cheers to you and along your journey, and I'll just remind you to step back, remember, be a thermostat, and breathe good oxygen. Thank you for listening to today's podcast, and I hope the messages and questions stimulate positive change along your path. As always, if these messages resonate with you and add value to your life, I hope you'll help amplify them throughout the world. Please rate, comment, and share on whatever podcast or social media platform you're using, and share this podcast with the people in your life or work who should be part of these conversations. That way, this spirit does, in fact, spread. If these messages or developing leaders and culture would be helpful to you and your organization, please contact us at jasonvbarger.com, jasonvbarger.com. And remember, we are all ambassadors for the culture we want to create in our life and work. We have to own the vision we want to be a part of. The future of leadership is you, is me, is us. Be a thermostat.